With a look at the playground dodgeball rules here at Intramural Sports at Florida State University, I'm Director of Intramural Sports David Peters, here to walk you through one of the most fun games we have in Intramurals, dodgeball, just like it was back in maybe third grade, and hey, there's even been a movie about it. Hey, it's good times, and we hope you'll enjoy it as a college student, but that means we've got some rules we want to talk to you about. Make sure you're going to play fairly and respectfully in our dodgeball leagues. We're going to cover that here in our playground dodgeball rules, the 2012 version. A couple of changes from years past we'll cover in this presentation as well. We'll also talk about where to go. So coming up in our podcast, facility information, also where you'll check in, make sure your players are ready to go at game time. Sport rules, of course, we'll talk about dodgeball, and league information. Know that everything we talk about in intramural sports comes off of our 7 principles, and they include things like involvement and participation, safety is a big factor to us, and sportsmanship. So you'll note that that comes into play as we continue to talk today. Hey, dodgeball is played in Tully Gym. That's right next door to the Leach Center. And no alcohol, no tobacco, and no pets are allowed in the gym. No food or flavored drinks either. That's on the gym floor. So if you bring your lunch or your dinner, for example, you need to finish that in the lobby before you come into the courts area to play. We don't permit food in the courts area of Tully Gym. Now, when you do come to play, make sure you check in, and that's all of your players who want to present their current valid FSU card at our sign-in location, which is in the Tully Gym lobby. Out there we have some couches and vending machines. You'll see our sign-in area clearly marked. Everyone will check in before every game that they play, wish their FSU card, and we'll add people to your roster right there, right before your first match or your second match or your third match. You can add players before any match, so there's no preseason roster you have to turn in. We just add players right when you get there for those particular matches. You can add players throughout the season all the way up until championship night, and on championship night your roster is locked. But before then, plenty of opportunities to add some new players. We encourage a couple of extras. It's always good to have a few subs to come in case a couple people call you at the last minute and can't play in one of your matches. Again, player check-in takes place in the lobby. We don't check in at the court, so even if someone is running late, they should stop by the sign-in table, check in, and then they can run out onto the court and join your team as soon as possible. In our spring dodgeball leagues, players can play on a men's and women's team, so one of those, and they can play on a co-rec squad. So 2 opportunities to play in our dodgeball league as long as one of those teams is a co-rec squad. That's how you can make 2 teams in our league. Once someone is signed in for your team, please note that they can't sign in for anyone else. They're stuck on your team for the entire season, so as you recruit your players, make sure that they're comfortable playing on your dodgeball team all season. We will not let them change to another team once they have signed in for you. As a captain, your responsibilities also include making sure that you know some issues with player eligibility and restricted players, our forgotten ID pass, forfeits, defaults, and related fines, which can hurt, so we don't want that to happen to you as the team captain. Also, we'll talk about regular season and playoff formats, all in our Team Captains podcast. That's available separately. You can also get some more details in our 7 principles of intramural sports, all available on our website. One of those principles that I mentioned is very important to us is sportsmanship. Across any sport that we have, it's very important that our players and our teams come out and respect the game, they respect the opponents, respect the game officials. Again, a good attitude makes sure that everyone is going to have an enjoyable experience in intramural sports. And so making sure that your sportsmanship is high, even in the fierce battle of dodgeball competition, is important. We have a scale of 0 to 4. You need a 3.0 average to make it through our regular season and into the postseason. For more information about sportsmanship, including everything that goes into your rating and how you can make sure that you keep it high for your team, view our sportsmanship podcast and the guidelines, again, available separately and on our website. All right, let's talk about dodgeball and men's and women's dodgeball. It is 6-on-6. You need 4 players required to start a match. 3 players at match time is a default. 2 or less is a forfeit, so we want to avoid that by getting at least 3 people there to sign in. You can't play, but that'll avoid you the costly fine. But with 4, you can play 4-on-6 in dodgeball. But as you know, just by playing some dodgeball or seeing some dodgeball, the idea is to get the other team out. So playing shorthanded is definitely a disadvantage when you have less players for your opponent to get out to win a particular game. Now in co-rec, it's also 6-on-6, but co-rec teams need a particular number of each gender, and that is 2 of each, 2 males and 2 females to start a match. You can not have more than 3 of each on the court at one time. That'll make sense when we talk about catch and return in a little bit. So if these numbers are actually wrong, 3 for a default, 2 for a forfeit. For co-rec, it's just like men's and women's play. It's all 6-on-6 in dodgeball. Now, for equipment, well, got to have some shoes. You know, we've had a variety of different exciting uniforms over the years, some interesting things worn at dodgeball, but appropriate shirt, shorts, or whatever in that area. But at the shoe end, you got to have them. No flip-flops, no sandals, boots, cleats, those sorts of things that would mark up the floor are no good. Appropriate court shoes. Those are tennis shoes, basketball shoes, things that would be appropriate to be running on a basketball court with. So high heels, not so much. We will help you out with this if we feel like something is a problem. Certainly our game officials and our supervisors will come over and address that issue with one of your players or with you as the team captain. Hats are also not allowed to be worn as a safety factor here in playground dodgeball. Jewelry, too, it needs to come off before the game. That's necklaces, bracelets, watches, earrings, the works, all comes off. A safety consideration. If it's not off, we'll rule a player out, and they'll have that opportunity to take that off. If they keep playing with jewelry, we'll just have them not play anymore. They'll be disqualified. Intramural Sports will provide all the dodgeballs in the league, so no need to bring those as well, and they may not be excessively crushed. Why do we have that rule? Well, our dodgeballs are more of the Nerf format as opposed to maybe those rubber red ones that you see in the movie. So they do have the ability to be crushed a little bit as you hold them. We allow a certain bit of that, but you can really wad them up very tight. That is not permitted. The equipment is expensive, and so this is something we don't permit for the safety of our equipment, really, so we can continue to play and provide that equipment in our program. So if we have this problem, you'll certainly be warned about that. And if we continue to have this problem, well, it just results in ejection. So our game officials will continue to let you know about that, but you'll see that when you get there and your teammates as well. So as you see them perhaps thinking about that, let them know it's not permitted. As we talk about the dodgeball rules today, a couple of things will come up, and those are active players and inactive players. Active players are the starters. You start every game, just like the movie, with 6 players, and so those players are going to be the active ones. All the rest of the folks maybe have some subs or some spectators, anything else considered inactive players, and they really can't do anything except watch. Your active players are part of the catch and return line. They're part of the group that can enter the game and also move around the court and retrieve dodgeballs that might be away from your court. Those are the active players, and we'll talk more about them and their responsibilities as we continue with our dodgeball rules. Now, match length and scoring, well, all of our dodgeball matches are 30 minutes in length, and we play an unlimited number of games in those 30 minutes. So your court and your opponent may play quickly, and you may get in 12 games, you may get in 7 games if you're playing a little bit slower. But everyone starts at the same time. You'll see the clock up on our wall scoreboards, very visible to everyone. You'll just keep playing game after game for 30 straight minutes. When you win a game, you get a point, and we'll tally up the scores there at the end to know who has won the overall match by the team that's won the most games during those 30 minutes. Now, in the final game, the buzzer is going to go off there in the gym, and we will stop play at that time and take a look on the court. And the team with more players when the buzzer goes off will win the point. In co-rec, we also count up the number of pins that are up and in the correct position, along with players. And so those will tally up to see who has more. If it's equal, no point is scored. So if you have more than the other team, that will be who wins the final point in that final game. Now, what if we're tied? If it's 4 games to 4 games at the end of 30 minutes, we have a way to break that, and we'll break it in overtime. In every one of our matches, including the regular season, we will play the overtime showdown. What happens is we just start up a new game. We start up a 6-on-6 game where both teams start at the baseline, and the first team to get someone out on the opponent's side wins the game. So one and done. It's very quick, but it gives us a winner, and that's how we'll work the overtime procedures in dodgeball. Let's take a look at the court, something new for 2012. Men's and women's will both play on the basketball-sized court. So you can see it here in one of our photos of Court 3 there in IntelliGym. We've got it outlined for the portion that's visible here in the green. In co-rec, we play a little differently, but in men's and women's, there are a couple of lines here that are important. The mid-court line here is highlighted in red. It won't be highlighted in red on the court, but here in our diagram. We also have a blue line and a purple line. Make note of these. It'll make more sense as we talk here coming up in just a bit, but they are located on the service line on the volleyball court, which is in gray. You can actually see a bit of it right down here, but we will have a particular part of the volleyball court, which will be an important line in our dodgeball games this season. In co-rec, as I was mentioning, a little bit different. We have those pins. They're actually marked here with cones, but they're more like bowling pins, and they are set up in these locations on each end of the court. So there are those right there. Here's that mid-court line that divides the teams here in co-rec, and you must stay on your side of the court in co-rec, and you're either trying to eliminate the players on the far side, or you're trying to knock down those 3 pins in order to win a particular game. All right, out-of-play areas include curtains, walls, banners. We got all kinds of stuff. We've got some basketball hoops up that are out of the screen here, but you can see on the far side that we've got that curtain, and something that hits a curtain, for example, would be considered out of play. If it hits the back bleachers, that's out of play. All those different areas are considered out of play, along with your substitutes and subs. So if it hits someone on the sideline, out of play. Once a ball hits an out of play area, also includes the floor. It cannot hit anyone else. It's immediately dead. It can't be caught if it bounces off a curtain. It can't be bounce off a curtain and hit somebody to be out. None of that. Once it hits an out of play area, it's dead and no longer able to do those things. Active players shall make every effort to remain inside the basketball court. We know that the lines are there, and many people are dancing around the sideline or the end line and may touch it on occasion, but they should make every effort to remain inside the basketball court. Players shall not leave the court to retrieve dodgeballs except when all 6 starters are on the court. And in that case, at the very start of each game, we give the opportunity for your team to have a person leave to go retrieve a dodgeball which might roll away. But once you have someone out, that person becomes a ball retriever and will be running around picking up balls for your team instead of because they're not in the game anymore, so they won't just be hanging out on the sideline. They're actually still actively helping you try to win that game. All right, let's talk about how the game would start for men's and women's, and really for co-rec too. What happens is we have a position here, the W's representing one team down here at the bottom, and they have 3 dodgeballs here in the yellow in which they will have a chance to get. The other end of the court has the X's, that's a different team, and we also have dodgeballs for them as well. So the team here on the far end will get the dodgeballs on their side. And same thing here on the lower end of the court. We will just say 3, 2, 1 dodgeball, and that's when each team will start and go after those dodgeballs, and they'll be able to throw them immediately. So all players will start out of bounds with a foot on the end line. There's a nice photo of that. As I mentioned, all players start out of bounds with a foot on the end line. Each team is designated those 3 balls on their side that we've already talked about. And again, there's a signal, the 3, 2, 1 dodgeball or some other sort of signal that our game official will make to get you on out there. Each ball, when it's retrieved, may be thrown immediately, or you can run it up to the line, the half-court line, or actually past the half-court line, as you'll see in just a second in men's and women's play, to the new restraining line before you throw it. When are you out in dodgeball? Well, when you're hit anywhere, including your clothing. So you get hit in the t-shirt. That's good enough. Just grazes your shirt, grazes your pants. We consider that out. So please remind your players of this, that they are out when this occurs. Hit anywhere, including the clothing, and in the head, in the shoulder, wherever, that player is out when you are hit by a dodgeball thrown by the opposing team. There are ways that you can now be saved. If you are hit perhaps in the shoulder and the ball pops up into the air, we'll talk about catch saves in a second. Also, intentionally being struck in the head with a ball, there's a different rule for that too. But in general, if you're hit anywhere, you are out in dodgeball. If you throw a ball that is legally caught by an opposing team player, well, you're out as well. And note that balls that are deflected by a person and caught by a different person also put out the thrower. That's considered a catch save. Again, we'll cover this really in depth a little bit later, but if it bounces off my shoulder and my teammate catches it, well, 1, I'm safe. That's a catch save for me. And 2, the original thrower is out because that ball was legally caught and it was in the air, it never touched the ground or an out-of-play area before it was caught. Another way that you'll be out is by intentionally jumping or moving out of play to dodge a ball. I just mentioned that we want you to be inside the court and making every effort to do so. So if you're on the back line standing, that's one thing, but if you're jumping out of bounds to avoid being hit by a dodgeball, well, then we're going to rule you out anyway, because the goal is to stay in play. And you can't just use the excuse that you're running out to get a ball. If someone is targeting you on the sideline and you get hit and you move out of play, we can tell, we're going to call you out. A player is also out when he or she touches any part of the opponent's primary area on the court at any time. We'll identify that primary area for you right now. So here's that court in men's and women's play. I mentioned we've got our purple team down here, and there's a purple line, which is at the 3-meter line. It's about 9 feet past half court. It's the volleyball line. So there's actually a gray line out here that will be our restraining line for the purple team. And the blue team can go all the way to its 3-meter line on the other side. That's going to create a zone here in the middle where both teams will be. So for the blue team, here you go. That's all of their area in which they can participate and hold the ball and run in. You can see it goes all the way to the other side of the court there at the 3-meter line. Similarly for the purple team, here it is. It's from the other end line straight on down across half court to the 3-meter line. And so that, again, as I mentioned, that makes this little zone here in red we've highlighted on this diagram where both teams can be. It's going to create a little bit shorter distance for these shots to take. It's going to get a little interesting there in the middle of the court. But we're excited about how this may change a bit of strategy with a little bit of overlay in where our teams can be on the court. Here it is again for an overhead view, in case you couldn't figure it out there from those end view diagrams. But the blue team here has from the cross half court 3-meter line all the way back down to its side. Here's the purple team, which has got its side of the half court, and here's the volleyball line actually. So they go all the way to the 3-meter line, which is right about here. And again, it's very close actually to the 3-point line, but not quite there. And then we have that overlap zone, as I talked about here, in the middle between the two 3-meter lines. Now this is different for the reason that is we won't have an open or a restricted period anymore. We had that in the past. Right now we're going to play all games like this throughout the entire time, and we think it's going to work out very well. Now that was men's and women's play. What about co-rec? Well, it's still the same. You've got your half-court line and that's it. There's not an advancement to the other side. Because we have the pins in play, which are marked here on the screen with some orange cone-looking things, but they're actually bowling pins, as I mentioned, we're not going to permit teams to go across half-court. Let's talk about headshots. I mentioned that just a minute ago. The thrower is out when he or she intentionally targets an opponent's head and hits that opponent in the head with an undeflected ball anywhere on the court. So direct headshots are illegal, and our game official will rule the thrower out in that case, and the person hit will still be safe. So intentional headshots are no good. The person hit is out if they intentionally duck. So this isn't soccer. We're not going to allow someone to intentionally duck to be hit in the head. If we feel like that is occurring at short distance, we may also rule someone out. But in general, actually, now that we've changed the rules this year so that if you're hit anywhere on the body, and that includes your head, you're going to be out unless we feel like it's intentional and with malice by your opponent. Now, when you're put out, players should move to the sideline, and they're allowed to retrieve balls for their in-play teammates. So players need to also remember their order of elimination for catch and return purposes. If you're in possession of a dodgeball when you get hit or otherwise put out, you can toss it or roll it to a teammate so that they can continue to play. Now, when you're put out, obviously, go out. That means if you're obviously hit by a illegally thrown ball, or if your thrown ball is obviously caught by an opponent. These are just obvious things. The player shall immediately acknowledge that they're out. That just means I've been hit, and then you go on over to the sideline as we just instructed and be ready for catch and return or help retrieve dodgeball. So they don't just have to say, I've been hit. I mean, that's not the kind of acknowledgement we're talking about, but they need to know that it's self-officiated to the point that players who get hit need to move on out. They should not wait for an official to call them out. If a game official has to call you out on something very obvious, if you get hit in the side and you stay on out there, our game official will actually call the player out and issue a technical foul. And what does a technical foul do? Well, it does a couple of these things. One, that player is out because they're obviously out and they cannot return for the rest of the game as part of the catch and return. So if we call a technical foul, that player is out for the remainder of that game. Also out for the next game. So they will be forced to sit out, kind of a penalty box sort of scenario there for the next game that is played. And the team that has this technical foul player will play short-handed. They're not allowed to replace them with a sub. So in that case, they would play 5-on-6. However, if they started the game with just 5 players, they would play 4-on-6. That's why the rule is written in that sort of way. So no replacement for the person who's been called for a technical foul because they were just not quick enough to acknowledge their obvious error. Now, this only applies in obvious situations. The obvious time where you get hit in the chest or hit in the arm or that your ball was caught on the other side. Other strange plays, rule violations, things like that that our game officials make are not considered technical fouls. They will use their discretion when they're making this sort of ruling. Now, if we have to rule a second technical foul on the same player, they're just disqualified. We give them one chance to get a technical foul, but at that point, we really just consider it blatant cheating, and they're going to be disqualified from the contest. Illegal throws. What happens when a thrower steps on or over the out-of-bounds line or the restraining line that I just mentioned, kind of that far line in the new diagram for men's and women's, or the mid-court line in co-rec? They got to stay on their side before, during, and after a throw. So you can't just follow through and end up on the other side. Those are not allowed, and that's considered an out. The thrower is ruled out in those cases. Kicking, striking, and spiking a ball at an opponent also is out. No illegal throw can put out an opponent, but if it is caught, it's good for a catch and return for that team. Balls may not be placed in the opponent's primary area of the court within the placer's team's reach. The placer is out. It seems like an odd rule, but we have developed a few over the years of watching college students play dodgeball, so this is almost like baiting your opponent, so we have a certain rule for that. Balls may not be heaved on the outside of the court onto the bleachers in the back. We consider that an unsportsmanlike act, so the heaver is out. Placers and heavers will be ruled out by our game official. If you want to roll a ball or toss a ball to the opponent, you have to do so by rolling it towards the center of the court inside the opponent's three-point arc. If you just roll it to the other side, you throw it out the side, we're going to rule you out for pretty much, again, wasting time and intentionally working in an unsportsmanlike manner against the other team. Mid-court throws. The throwers, again, must remain on their side of the court during a throw. Stepping on that line is a violation, and again, we'll rule you out when that does happen. What happens when there's a deflection? Well, players who are hit with a deflected ball that is not caught subsequently, so it hits me, or it hits me and hits another player and then hits the floor, both of us are out. They're both out in that particular case, so a ball can continue to hit players kind of like pinball before it hits the ground and eliminate multiple people. Please also note that we may not use a dodgeball to deflect a thrown ball. This isn't shield. You can't shield yourself with a dodgeball. That's considered part of you. And so if you're hit in the holding a dodgeball, you'll still be considered out in that particular case. So there's no intentionally deflecting a dodgeball in order to stay in the game. A dodgeball can deflect off multiple opponents, as I just mentioned, and put out multiple players, that pinball effect. Catch save. We talked about it earlier. Here's kind of the written rule for that. Any airborne ball that is not touched an out-of-play area may be caught to put out the thrower, and that's even after a deflection off another player. So you're catch saving. You're saving them if you catch the ball as an opponent. If a ball is caught, all players previously hit by that ball are safe, so you've saved them, and the person who threw it is out because that's a catch of a thrown ball. The three factors that involved with a legal catch include the following. A player catches, starts the catching motion inbounds, catches the ball and stays in bounds after the catch, maintaining a stationary position in bounds while still holding the ball. Think about basketball. If you're going to take a pass there and you got to catch it and stay in bounds in order to continue to be in the game, that's how catching a ball here works. If you try to catch a ball and then you fall out of bounds doing that, well, one, that's not a catch anymore because you're out of bounds, so the thrower is safe and the catcher is out because you've been hit by a ball and ended up out of bounds. So that's no good either. You may not lift a teammate to catch a ball. That is considered illegal as well. Catch and return, just like it sounds. After the initial throw, if a ball is caught by someone on the opposing team, the thrower is out. Even after deflections, the thrower is out, as we've talked about in the new catch-save rule. And the first person in that team's catch and return line can come back in. So if you catch a ball, a teammate may come back in if they've already been eliminated. There's a maximum of 6 players on the court. There are no stored catch and return. So if all 6 players are out there, the thrower is still out. You just don't have anyone to be on returning to the court. In co-rec, a member of the underrepresented gender must come back in. So if you have 2 females and 1 female on the court and there's a catch, then a female must be the person to come back in. If it's an equal number, then it's the first person in the catch and return line that comes in, whether that's a male or a female. Out-of-play players, eliminated players, and all subs must be positioned on the sideline. We don't let anyone be on the end line. So we're thinking sidelines in this particular case. No out-of-play players may, again, like I said, take that position on the end line, and players may go behind the court to retrieve balls but need to return to the sideline. So I mentioned already active players who are out. You're waiting to get it back in because of a catch and return. You're responsible for going around the court and trying to retrieve balls. If you go behind the end line, that's fine, but you need to return the ball as quickly as possible and then move back to the sideline. Spectators will be positioned on the sidelines in all of our matches as a safety consideration. Retrieval of dodgeball is limited to those active players who have been put out in the current game and are properly registered as subs, and spectators aren't allowed to help with that. And when there are 6 players in the game, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, and no subs are available, then an active player can leave the court and they need to come back in as soon as possible. They're not eligible to be put out while they're outside the court. Again, this really only happens at the very start of the game. While your team has 6 players, sooner or later someone will be out and it'll be able to help with ball retrieval. Outside the court, players may never cross the center line to retrieve dodgeballs anywhere in the gym. And this also includes men's and women's play. So in co-rec, it makes sense. You have your half of the mid-court line kind of divides it up. And so you're stuck on your half everywhere in the court. So if you leave the court to go retrieve balls, it's got to be on your side. The same holds true in men's and women's, and we're going to go ahead and use that mid-court line as that restraining line too. So despite the fact we have a little open area there, kind of that crossover space in the court, you need to stay on your side of the mid-court line when you're outside the court in doing this sort of ball retrieval so that we're not fighting over dodgeballs that are rolling around there near mid-court. Participants should not climb on the bleachers. If a ball gets stuck up there, we have staff and they have the procedure for getting that down. We care about your safety and don't want you to get hurt on those bleachers there in Telly Gym. What about stalling? Certainly part of the tactics in dodgeball can come into stalling to a certain degree, but we don't think it's a way to actively play the game. And so teams and players must be actively involved and engaged in the game. That's by trying to put out other players or retrieving balls to get them back in. Inactivity, which includes excessive rolling and heaving of balls without the intent to put out an opponent, is considered stalling, and this rule applies no matter how many balls are in the possession of a particular team. The game official is going to issue a warning first for stalling. If we feel like this is just going on too long, we will issue a warning. The second violation in the same game, the game official will actually end the game and award the winning point to the opposing team. So after you've been warned, it's a good idea to really step up that activity for that game before you lose the game based on stalling. A new game begins as soon as we've ruled that the previous game is ended, time permitting on the clock. Excessive stalling is considered unsportsmanlike conduct. So if we stop one game for stalling, we don't want to have to stop another one. At that point, this is just too much. It's unsportsmanlike conduct. We're actually just going to send you home. At that point, the match becomes forfeited if there's excessive stalling, and we have to rule on this on multiple occasions. In fact, we've got a rule in dodgeball. Perhaps this is the only sport with this rule. It's called the play fair or go home rule. Sportsmanship violations, cheating, and other blatant rule violations just not tolerated. Our staff, our court monitors, our game officials, administrative staff, we're watching those games. We want to make sure that they're fair and fun. But we know how much brain power some of our college students will put into a dodgeball match, and we appreciate that. But there's a certain point where perhaps the sportsmanship has gone a little bit too far on the wrong side. If we have to stop the game for this, we'll have a discussion, and we could disqualify one team, or if it's happening on both sides, both teams. It's called the play fair or go home rule, because if we have to stop the game, we might just be sending you home. When a single team faces disqualification, we'll ask the opponent if they want you to stay, and they're the only ones who can say that. They may disagree with our decision that you have been excessively stalling or excessively unsportsmanlike, and they can say, hey, you know what? We'll let the opposing team stay. We'll give them one more chance. If they decide that they want to take the win, they can certainly do that. There are no post-game protests or office appeals for dodgeball disqualifications. If it gets to the play fair, go home rule out there at the courts, we've just had enough, quite honestly. If both teams face the disqualification, again, we will send both teams home. We'll have no winner. If it occurs in the playoffs, it'll just go down as a double default in that particular case, and the winner you're supposed to play continues to move on. That's dodgeball. There are a lot of rules to that because perhaps there's nothing, you haven't played that in high school, there are no other rule books to go back on, so we've developed some here, and we'll help you out at the game site with our game officials. We'll certainly try to explain some of the key rules to your players before the game, but hopefully you'll know a few that you can answer some questions on our team captain's exam. In order to finalize your team's registration, you need to take the captain's exam and achieve the required score, which is 90% by the deadline. And the deadline day and time are listed on the website, so make sure you check that to know exactly when you have to have this test taken by. Note that you can take it multiple times, and you have multiple opportunities there then to achieve the appropriate score for your team. If you need to change something about your team, like the team name or something else, make sure you do that before the end of the registration period. So it certainly helps us out and allows us to give you some assistance with maybe a time change if we have that opportunity. For more information on deadlines and actually to take the exam, visit our website at fsu.campusrec.com/im. For more information about regular season schedules, playoff draw meetings if they occur, playoff brackets, the complete sport rules of dodgeball, which are longer than what we've talked about today, that's all available on our website. Also note that all teams, regardless of record, will advance to our playoffs as long as you have the sportsmanship right. So even if you were winless in the regular season, we let you go on into the playoffs. That's another opportunity for you to come out and play. Hopefully we'll get you matched up with another team that perhaps was at your skill level, and that'll make for a good experience there in your playoff game or match. For more information about what's going on in intramural sports or for just general dodgeball questions, give us a call in our office, 850-644-2430. You can also email us anytime from our website, and we'll try to get back to you as soon as we can. And there it is one more time, fsu.campusrec.com/im. For intramural sports here at Florida State University, I'm Director of Intramural Sports David Peters. Good luck and have fun this intramural dodgeball season.